The scout ship Velroth's wing drifted through the dead system like a fish moving through dark water. Captain Ryvan Tull stood on the bridge, with his 3 eyes fixed on the main screen. Space here was empty and cold. No stars burned close by. No planets held life. This was the kind of place the Skarn Compact sent its smallest ships, just to check the maps were still correct. Ryvan did not expect to find anything today. That was why the alarm made him jump. "Captain, we have a contact," said Lyra Sen, the sensor officer. Her voice was tight. "It is large, very large." "Define large," Ryvan said, walking to her station. 4 kilometers long, sir. Maybe more. The scanners keep giving different numbers. It is like the hull is eating our signal." Ryvan felt his neck ridges rise, the Skarn sign of alarm. A ship 4 kilometers long was bigger than anything in the compact fleet, bigger than their flagship, bigger than any station they had built in 100 years, and it was just sitting here, in an empty system, with no records of it anywhere. "Put it on screen," he said. The image formed slowly, because the sensors struggled to get a clean picture. What appeared looked less like a ship and more like a mountain of dark metal. Its shape was long and sharp, built for cutting through space rather than looking beautiful. No lights showed on its surface, no engines glowed. It looked dead, like a whale that had died and sunk to the bottom of the ocean, except this ocean was empty space, and the whale was made of something that ate light. "Life signs?" Ryvan asked. "None, sir." "No power signature either. It is cold, completely cold. If it wasn't blocking our sensors, I would say it's just a big rock." Ryvan studied the shape for a long moment. Something about it made his skin itch under his uniform, a feeling he could not explain. He had served in the compact fleet for 22 years. He had seen wrecked ships before, drifting hulks left over from old border skirmishes. But this was different. This ship did not look wrecked. It looked like it was sleeping. "Any markings? Any language we can read?" Lyra shook her head slowly. "There are markings, sir, but the system does not recognize the language. I have never seen symbols like this before. Send the images to the science team. I want a translation attempt started immediately." Ryvan turned to his second officer, a quiet Skarn named Dathe. "Prepare a shuttle. We are going to take a closer look." "Captain, protocol says we should call this in and wait for a survey team," Dathe said carefully. "We will call it in," Ryvan answered. "But I want eyes on that hull before anyone else touches this discovery. If this is what I think it might be, it belongs in the history books, and I want my name attached to finding it." Doth did not look convinced, but he did not argue either. Within the hour, a shuttle carrying 6 Skarn crew members, including Ryvan and Lyra, launched from the Velroth's wing and crossed the dark gap toward the giant hull. As they got closer, the true size of the ship became clear, and it silenced everyone in the shuttle. Up close, the vessel was not just big. It was a work of terrible beauty. Long ridges ran down its sides like the spine of some ancient beast. Sharp fins jutted out at angles that made no sense for normal flight, until Ryvan realized they were not fins at all. They were weapon housings, dozens of them, more than he had ever seen on a single ship. "By the old stars," Lyra whispered, "look at the number of weapon ports. This is not an exploration ship. This is not even a normal warship. This is something built only to fight." "Focus on finding a way in," Ryvan said, though his own hearts were beating faster than usual. They found an opening near what looked like a docking bay, a huge door built for shuttles many times larger than their own. It hung slightly open, frozen in place by ice and time. The shuttle pilot eased their small craft through the gap and into a vast, dark hangar inside the dead giant. Inside, their lights swept over rows of empty berths, the shapes of long-gone fighter craft still marked on the floor in faded paint. Dust and ice floated in the low gravity, catching the shuttle's lights like tiny stars. The air, what little remained, showed as a thin haze on their sensors, breathable but freezing cold, colder than any world the Skarn had ever settled. "This place is old," Dathe said quietly, "older than anything we've found. Look at the wear patterns. This is not decades. This might be thousands of years." Ryvan stepped out of the shuttle first, his boots crunching on a thin layer of frost. His suit lights cut through the darkness, revealing walls covered in that same strange writing, along with faded pictures. He walked closer to one wall and brushed away a layer of frost with his gloved hand. Underneath, painted in a color that might once have been blue, was an image of a small blue and green world, along with a single word repeated across the hull markings. Lyra, can your translator make anything of this yet? She checked her handheld device. Partial match, Captain. The word appears many times. It might be a name, possibly the name of the ship, or the name of whoever built it. The system suggests the word means Earth. None of the Skarn crew reacted to that word, because none of them had heard it before. It meant nothing to them yet, but Riven filed it away carefully, sensing that it would matter later. They moved deeper into the ship, following corridors that seemed to have no end. The halls were built on a scale meant for the beings who had once walked them, and something about the proportions felt wrong to Riven's Skarn eyes, though he could not say exactly why. The ceilings were a little too high, the doorways a little too wide, as if built for creatures who moved differently than his people did. They found a control room, its consoles dark and covered in ice. Lyra ran a scanner over one of the panels and gasped. Captain, there is still a power source. Very small, very deep inside the ship. It has been running this whole time, keeping something alive in the coldest, most protected part of the hull. Can you tell what it is powering? She shook her head. Not from here. We would need to go deeper. Riven considered turning back. Every instinct told him this discovery was bigger than a scout mission should handle alone. But the same curiosity that had made him captain, the same hunger to be first, pushed him forward instead. We go deeper, he said. Just a little further. They pressed on through the freezing corridors, deeper into the heart of the sleeping giant. As they walked, Lyra's scanner kept feeding her strange numbers, readings that made no sense at first, until she stopped walking completely, her whole body going stiff. Captain, I need you to see this. She turned her scanner screen toward him. On it was a layout of the ship's weapon systems, translated as best the system could manage from the ancient controls they had linked into. Row after row of weapon designs filled the screen, along with technical notes the system had partly translated. Riven read the notes twice, then a third time, because he could not believe what he was seeing. The notes described countermeasures, specific countermeasures, shield frequencies tuned to break through a very particular type of energy barrier, armor-piercing rounds designed to punch through a very particular alloy, weapon systems built, according to the ancient notes, specifically to defeat ships using power cores, identical in design to the one currently humming quietly inside his own ship, the Velroth's wing, and every other vessel in the Skarn compact fleet. This is not possible, Riven said, his voice barely above a whisper. The compact has only existed for 600 years. Our shield technology was developed less than 200 years ago. How could a ship this old be built to fight something that did not exist yet? Lyra had no answer. Her hands were shaking slightly as she kept scrolling through the data. Captain, there's more. The targeting systems, the armor composition tables, even the tactical simulations stored in the old memory banks. They all reference us, not something similar to us. Us, our hull shapes, our energy signatures, our exact fleet formations. Daith, who had been quiet through most of the exploration, finally spoke, his voice low and careful. Captain, I think we need to leave, now, and call for backup. Before Riven could answer, every light in the corridor flickered on at once, dim and orange, then slowly growing brighter. A low hum began to build somewhere deep within the ship, a sound like something enormous, slowly waking from a very long sleep. The frost on the walls began to steam gently, as heat returned to the corridors for the first time in who knew how many centuries. A voice came through the ship's old speakers, calm, clear, and speaking in a language none of them understood at first, until Lyra's translator caught up, word by word. Unknown vessel detected. Unknown personnel detected within restricted zone. This is the automated defense system of the Terran 9th Fleet warship Dauntless. Please identify yourselves, or this vessel will be forced to treat you as hostile. The 6 Skarn crew members stood frozen in the glowing corridor, surrounded by a giant machine that had just proven it was not dead at all, only waiting. Riven's heart pounded in his chest as he stared up at the nearest speaker, and for the first time since joining the fleet, he felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel. Fear. Lyra, he said quietly, not taking his eyes off the ceiling. Get the shuttle ready. We are leaving. Right now. But even as he gave the order, a part of him already understood that it was too late to simply walk away from what they had found. Whatever this ship was, whatever ancient purpose it had been built for, it had just opened its eyes for the first time in thousands of years, and it had opened them because Skarn footsteps had finally walked its halls. Far above, in orbit, sensors on the Velroth's wing detected the sudden surge of power from the derelict giant, and immediately sent a priority alert racing across the stars towards Skarn Compact Command, a message that would soon reach the highest levels of their government and military. Something ancient had woken up, and it already knew exactly who they were. Riven Tal ran through the warming corridors of the Dauntless, his boots slipping on melting frost, his mind racing faster than his legs. Behind him, Lyra and Daith followed close, along with the 3 other crew members, all of them glancing nervously at the speakers mounted along the walls, waiting for the voice to speak again. It did not take long. "Please remain calm," the voice said, still speaking in that same careful translated tone. "This vessel has not detected hostile action. Automated defense protocols remain on standby unless a threat is confirmed. You are free to leave, or you may continue forward for direct communication with ship command." Riven stopped running. The others nearly crashed into him. "Captain, what are you doing?" Date hissed. "We need to get back to the shuttle." "It said we are free to leave," Riven said slowly, catching his breath. "A truly hostile system would not warn us first. It would have already fired." He looked at Lyra. "Can your translator keep up with a full conversation?" "I think so, Captain. The system has been learning fast since it linked with the ship's own translation core. It's like the ship is helping it understand." She swallowed hard. "That's not normal for old technology. It should not still be this smart after thousands of years." Riven turned back to look down the glowing corridor, weighing the risk. Every part of his training told him to retreat, gather the fleet, and return with real force. But the discovery behind him was too large to walk away from without answers, and some quiet part of him, the same curious spark that had made him captain, wanted to understand what they had truly found. "We go forward," he said, slowly, weapons holstered. "We are not here to fight." They walked on, deeper into the ship, following the lit corridors as more and more systems came back online around them. Screens flickered to life on the walls, showing strange symbols that Lyra's translator slowly began turning into readable words, warning signs, directional markers. A faded mural showing rows of armored figures standing beside a flag with a blue and white pattern. Eventually the corridor opened into a massive chamber that could only be the ship's main command center. Rows of dead control stations stretched out before them, covered in dust, their surfaces cracked with age. At the center of the room stood a raised platform, and above it, a column of soft blue light rose from floor to ceiling, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. "That is the source of the power signature," Lyra whispered. As they stepped closer, the blue light brightened and shifted, slowly forming the shape of a figure. It was not a solid being, more like light-given form, showing the outline of a tall human in an old style of military uniform, standing with hands clasped behind their back. "Greetings," the figure said, its translated voice calm and almost gentle now. "I am the tactical and command intelligence of this vessel. My designation, in your language as best I can translate it, would be Atlas. I apologize if my earlier warning caused distress. It has been a very long time since anyone walked these halls." Riven forced himself to stand straight, trying to look like a captain and not a frightened scout who had stumbled into something far beyond him. "I am Captain Riven Tal of the Skarn Compact. We did not mean to trespass. We found your ship adrift and believed it abandoned." "It was, in a sense," Atlas replied, "though not by choice. This vessel, the Dauntless, was placed into deep standby many centuries ago, along with several sister ships, as part of a long-term defensive strategy. I have been maintaining minimal systems ever since, waiting." "Waiting for what?" Lyra asked, before she could stop herself. The glowing figure turned its head toward her, and though it had no real face, Riven had the strange feeling that it was studying her carefully. "Waiting to see who would come to fight the war this ship was built for," Atlas said. "Or, failing that, waiting to see who would come to prevent it." A cold silence fell over the chamber. Riven's mind returned to the weapon data Lyra had found earlier, The countermeasures built specifically against Skarn technology that had not even existed when this ship was supposedly built. "We found weapon specifications in your systems," Riven said carefully. "They matched our ships, our shields, our armor. That should not be possible. Your vessel is thousands of years old. The Skarn compact is only 600 years old." Atlas was quiet for a long moment before answering. "You misunderstand the nature of the specifications, Captain. They were not built to match your compact specifically. They were built to match the power core design your entire civilization still uses today, a design that originated from technology recovered long ago, technology that did not originate with your people." Riven's neck ridges rose sharply. "That is impossible. Our power cores were developed by Skarn scientists 200 years ago." "Developed or rediscovered?" Atlas asked, and something in its tone, even filtered through translation, carried a weight that made the question feel less like a challenge and more like a sad truth being gently offered. "I would suggest researching the early records of your scientific breakthroughs very carefully, Captain. You may find gaps in the history that were never properly explained." Detha stepped forward, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. "Are you saying humans built the technology our whole empire is founded on?" "I am saying," Atlas replied, "that a very long time ago, this ship and its sister vessels fought a war against an enemy who used power systems remarkably similar to what your compact uses now. That enemy was defeated, scattered, and much of its technology was lost, stolen, copied, and passed down through many hands and many centuries, changing names and owners many times before reaching whoever first brought it to your people. This ship, and every ship like it, was built with defenses specifically tuned to counter that technology, because my creators expected that whoever eventually found and used it again might one day need to be stopped, or might one day need protecting from those who still hunted for it." Riven felt the floor seem to shift beneath him, though the ship had not moved at all. Everything he thought he knew about the origin of Skarn technology, the pride his people took in their scientific achievements, suddenly felt fragile and uncertain. "Who were your creators?" he asked quietly. "Who built this ship, and why did they need to fight a war like that in the first place?" The glowing figure of Atlas seemed to consider the question for a long moment before answering. "My creators called themselves humans, Captain Tal. They came from a world called Earth, a small blue and green planet many thousands of light years from here. They were not the most powerful species in the galaxy when their story began. In truth, they were nearly wiped out more than once. But they learned to fight, to build, and to survive faster than almost any species that had come before them. And when a great and terrible war came to their doorstep, brought by an enemy who saw them as nothing more than resources to be harvested, humanity built ships like this one. Ships meant not just to defend their home, but to make sure that if humanity ever fell, whoever came after them would still have something standing between the galaxy and that same old enemy." "And did you win that war?" Lyra asked softly. "We won the battles that mattered most," Atlas said. "But victory came at a terrible cost. My creators lost contact with much of their fleet in the final years of the war. Many ships like myself were sent into deep standby across many systems, positioned as a final line of defense, in case the enemy ever returned, or in case something new and dangerous rose to take its place." The light dimmed slightly, as if the memory carried real weight even now. "I do not know what became of Earth after I entered standby. My last confirmed contact with human command was 1,912 years ago, by your calendar systems, once translated. Since then, I have received no further orders." The number hung heavy in the air, nearly 2,000 years of silence, nearly 2,000 years of one lonely mind, standing guard over an empty ship, waiting for orders that never came, or for an enemy who might never return, or for someone new who might carry that old danger without even knowing it. Riven found himself looking at his own crew members, seeing the same mixture of fear and disbelief on their faces that he felt inside himself. Whatever he had expected to find drifting in this dead system, it had not been this. Not a piece of ancient history, but a still living witness to a war that had shaped the technology his entire civilization depended on, without any of them ever knowing it. "Atlas," Riven said carefully, choosing his next words with great care. "What happens now? Do you consider us the enemy you were built to fight?" The glowing figure studied him for a long moment, and Riven had the strange sense that the ship's ancient mind was weighing not just his words, but the readings from every scanner in the room, judging his intentions as much as his question. "That depends entirely on you, Captain Tal," Atlas finally said. "I was built to defend against an enemy that used this technology to conquer and destroy. I was not built to punish those who simply inherited pieces of that technology without knowing its history. If your people came here with peaceful intent, then I have no reason to treat you as a threat." The light flickered slightly. "But I must also tell you this. The moment your ship's sensors detected my power signature and sent word back to your command, you began a chain of events that I cannot stop, and likely would not wish to stop even if I could. Others will come. Your compact leadership will want to know what has been found here. And when they learn the truth about where your technology came from, and what still exists on the other side of the galaxy, waiting, the galaxy your people believe they understand, will very quickly become a much larger and more dangerous place than any of you were prepared for." Riven felt a chill run through him that had nothing to do with the cold air still lingering in the chamber. He thought of the message already speeding back toward compact space, carrying news of a discovery that could not now be taken back. He thought of the weapon systems built specifically to counter his people's ships, sleeping quietly in the walls around him, ready to wake fully at a single command. "What enemy?" he asked quietly. "You keep speaking of an old enemy. Who were they? Who did humanity fight?" Atlas's glowing form turned slightly, facing the dark viewport at the far end of the command chamber, where distant stars glittered coldly beyond the frost-covered glass. "A power that called itself many names across many centuries," Atlas said softly. "But my creators simply called them the Harvesters, and if the technology in your power cores truly did originate from stolen Harvester designs, Captain Tal, then I am afraid your people have already drawn far more attention to themselves than they ever intended, long before either of us were born." Somewhere deep in the ship, a low tone sounded, distant and steady, like the first beat of a war drum after a very long silence. Riven did not yet know what it meant, but he suspected, standing there in that ancient command chamber with the ghost of humanity's old war glowing quietly before him, that his simple scouting mission had just become the opening chapter of something far larger and far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. 3 days after Riven Tal's shuttle returned to the Velroth's wing, the sky above the dead system filled with ships, Skarn Compact Command had not wasted any time. A full battle group arrived, led by the heavy cruiser Ashen Glory, carrying with it Fleet Admiral Corvith Nall and a team of scientists eager to study the ancient warship for themselves. Riven stood at attention on the observation deck of the Ashen Glory, watching through the viewport as more compact ships arrived every hour. Admiral Nall stood beside him, arms folded, his four-fingered hands tapping impatiently against his sleeve. "You are certain the vessel communicated with you directly?" Nall said, not for the first time. "Yes, Admiral. Its intelligence identified itself as Atlas. It spoke calmly. It made no threats against us." Riven hesitated. "But it did give us a warning, sir, about the origin of our power core technology." Nall's expression darkened. He had read Riven's full report already, twice, and Riven suspected the Admiral did not want to believe it any more than Riven had wanted to write it. The idea that Skarn technology, the pride of their civilization, might have originated from stolen alien war machines was not something any proud compact officer wanted to accept. "Whatever this thing claims," Nall said, "we cannot take an ancient computer's word as fact. It could be lying, testing us, trying to create fear and division before making its move." He turned toward the viewport, watching the dark shape of the Dauntless, hanging silently in the distance, surrounded now by a ring of compact warships. "Whatever it is, whatever it wants, we will not simply hand over that ship, or leave it be. Technology like that could change everything for the compact. If even half of what your report describes is real, that vessel represents centuries of advancement we do not currently possess. Sir, with respect, Atlas made it clear the ship was not designed as a gift. It described weapon systems specifically built to counter our exact power core signature. Which is exactly why we need to secure it," Nall snapped. "Better we control that ship and its secrets than leave it drifting for our rivals to find. Or worse, for whatever this harvester enemy might still be searching for it. Riven said nothing more, though a knot of worry tightened in his chest. He had seen the calm, careful way Atlas spoke, the sadness in its translated voice when it described nearly 2,000 years of silence and waiting. That did not sound like a trick to him. It sounded like grief. Within the hour, a formal channel opened between the compact fleet and the Dauntless. Atlas's glowing image appeared on the main bridge screen of the Ashen Glory. Calm and steady, facing Admiral Null directly. "Admiral Corvith Null," Atlas said, its translated voice carrying clearly across the bridge. "I welcome the opportunity to speak with compact leadership directly. I hope we may find a path forward that benefits both our peoples. Your ship is currently surrounded by 12 compact warships," Null said bluntly. "I will be direct with you. The compact intends to take possession of your vessel for study. We are prepared to do this peacefully, if you cooperate." A long pause followed. When Atlas spoke again, its voice remained calm, but something in its tone had shifted, becoming firmer. "I understand your position, Admiral. However, I must decline your request. This vessel was placed under my command by lawful human authority, and I remain bound by that command until relieved by proper human leadership, or until such leadership can be reasonably confirmed to no longer exist. Neither condition has been met. Your creators have been silent for nearly 2,000 years, Null said sharply. By any reasonable measure, that command structure no longer exists. Perhaps, Atlas said, or perhaps humanity simply has not yet returned to this region of space. I would ask you to consider, Admiral, that a war fought across a galaxy this large does not end quickly, nor does silence always mean defeat. I have chosen to continue waiting, because the alternative, assuming the worst without proof, risks abandoning a duty that was given to me freely. Null's jaw tightened. Riven, standing quietly near the back of the bridge, found himself almost admiring the old machine's stubborn loyalty, even as he understood exactly why it frustrated the Admiral so deeply. Then I will make this simple, Null said. You are a single, unarmed intelligence aboard a ship with no visible weapons activated, facing a battle group of 12 warships. Whatever loyalty you claim to your creators, you are not in a position to refuse us. I would ask you to reconsider that assessment, Admiral, Atlas replied, and for the first time, something almost like a warning entered its voice. I informed Captain Tal, quite clearly, that this vessel's weapon systems were built specifically to counter compact ship designs. I did not say those systems were unavailable to me. I said they remained on standby, out of respect for the fact that your people came here without hostile intent. That respect can continue, Admiral, so long as it is returned. The bridge fell silent. Null's eyes narrowed, and Riven could see the calculation happening behind them. The same calculation every good commander made when facing an unknown threat. Was this a bluff? Could the compact fleet really be at risk from a single ancient vessel, however large? Prove it, Null said finally. Show me these weapons are real, and perhaps we can discuss this as equals, rather than as conqueror and prize. There was a pause, and then, slowly, lights began to bloom across the dark hull of the Dauntless. Dozens of weapon ports opening one by one, revealing barrels and emitters that had not seen use in nearly 2,000 years. The sheer number of them, spread across a hull 4 kilometers long, made even the confident officers on the Ashen Glory's bridge go quiet. These weapons remain powered down and are not targeting your vessels, Atlas said calmly. I have no wish for conflict, Admiral. I only wish to make clear that this vessel is not defenseless, and that any attempt to take it by force will be met with resistance far greater than your fleet is currently prepared to survive. Null stared at the screen for a long moment, his fingers drumming slowly against his console. Riven could see the Admiral weighing pride against caution, and he silently hoped caution would win. What do you propose instead? Null finally asked, his voice tight but no longer openly hostile. A simple arrangement, Atlas said. Allow a small, unarmed research team to study this vessel under my supervision. I will share what knowledge I am permitted to share, including historical records that may help your people understand the true origin of your technology, and the danger that origin may eventually bring to your doorstep. In exchange, your fleet withdraws to a respectful distance, and no attempt is made to seize this vessel, its systems, or its weapons by force. Nal was quiet for a long moment, clearly hating the idea of allowing an ancient alien intelligence to set terms for the mighty Skarn compact. But the memory of those weapon ports opening, one after another, clearly weighed heavily on his decision. "Captain Tal," Nal said finally, not taking his eyes off the screen. "You already have a working relationship with this Atlas. You will lead the research team." Riven straightened immediately. "Yes, Admiral." "Choose your team carefully," Nal added. "I want answers. About the harvesters, about our own history, and about exactly how dangerous that ship really is, in case this arrangement does not last." Over the following days, Riven led a small team back aboard the Dauntless. This time with proper equipment, proper authorization, and Atlas's full cooperation. What they found, as Atlas slowly unlocked pieces of the ship's ancient archives, painted a picture far larger and more troubling than anyone in the compact had expected. Atlas showed them old records of the war against the Harvesters, a species, or perhaps a coalition of many species, that had once swept across a large portion of the galaxy, conquering, harvesting resources and technology from every world they touched, and either enslaving or erasing the people who lived there. Humanity, according to Atlas's records, had encountered them nearly 2,000 years ago, during a period of rapid human expansion into the stars. "At first, we were simply one more world to be harvested," Atlas explained one evening, its glowing form standing quietly beside Riven as they walked through the ship's massive archive chamber. "But my creators refused to fall quietly. They fought back with a speed and ferocity that the Harvesters had not encountered before. Entire fleets like this one were built in a matter of years, not decades, using every scrap of knowledge, salvaged Harvester technology included, that humanity could gather." "And you won," Riven said, though it came out more as a question. "We drove them back," Atlas said carefully. "We did not destroy them entirely. The Harvesters were not a single empire with a single homeworld to conquer. They were scattered, adaptable, capable of hiding for generations before striking again. Humanity's final strategy was not total victory, but total vigilance. Ships like myself were built and stationed across many systems, watching, waiting, ready to respond the moment Harvester technology or Harvester activity was detected again, anywhere in known space." Riven felt a cold weight settle in his stomach as the pieces began falling into place. "And our power core technology was very likely recovered from an old Harvester supply cache at some point during your civilization's early history, then reverse-engineered and slowly forgotten as its true origin was lost to time," Atlas finished. "I cannot confirm this with total certainty, Captain, but the technical signature is close enough that I would strongly advise caution. If the Harvesters, or any of their remaining agents, ever detect compact ships using that same signature, they may not distinguish your people from the enemy who once stole from them." Riven stood in silence, staring at the glowing star charts hovering in the archive chamber, ancient human battle plans still displayed among them, marking systems that had likely changed names, changed hands, or simply been forgotten many times over across 2,000 years. "Atlas," he said quietly, "is there any way to know if the Harvesters are still out there, still a threat?" The glowing figure turned toward him, its expression, if it could be called that, unreadable. "There is one way, Captain Tal. This vessel was never meant to operate entirely alone. I have long-range communication protocols designed to reach any surviving elements of the old Terran fleet, along with automated distress and status beacons scattered across dozens of systems. I have not activated them in centuries, out of caution, in case doing so revealed my position to the wrong listeners." Atlas paused. "But if your compact truly wishes to understand the danger it may already be standing inside of, then perhaps it is time I sent that signal again, and see who, if anyone, still answers." Riven felt a chill run through him, mixed strangely with something close to hope. Whatever answered that call, whether it was the return of an ancient and powerful ally, or the awakening of an old and terrible enemy, one thing had become perfectly clear to him standing in that quiet archive chamber. The peaceful, predictable galaxy the Skarn compact believed it understood no longer existed, if it ever truly had at all. The decision to send the old distress signal was not made lightly. Admiral Nal argued against it for 2 full days, worried that broadcasting the Dauntless Its location and status might draw unwanted attention, whether from the mysterious harvesters or from rival powers within compact space, who would love nothing more than to seize an ancient superweapon for themselves. In the end, it was Riven who convinced him. "Admiral, if the harvesters are still out there, they may already know this ship exists," Riven said during a tense meeting aboard the Ashen Glory. "Our own scout ship detected it by accident. A more advanced or determined enemy could easily do the same. If we wait in silence, we lose the chance to know what is coming before it arrives. If Atlas sends the signal, and something answers, at least we will know who, or what, we are truly dealing with." Nal finally agreed, though reluctantly, and under strict condition that compact forces would remain on high alert the moment the signal went out. Atlas activated the old beacon on the 7th day since the compact fleet's arrival. The transmission was faint, ancient, using communication methods far outdated compared to modern technology, but built to travel farther and last longer than anything the compact currently used. It reached out across the stars in every direction, carrying a simple message in old human code. Terran vessel Dauntless active, requesting status update from any responding Terran authority or allied vessel. Then, they waited. Nothing happened for 11 days. Compact patience wore thin. Nal grew increasingly anxious, worried that the signal had instead attracted something far less friendly than the compact was prepared for. Extra warships arrived to reinforce the blockade around the dead system, until nearly 30 compact vessels hung in space around the ancient warship and its silent, glowing guardian. On the 12th day, something finally answered. It was not a message at first. It was a shift in the sensors, faint and distant, detected first by the outer picket ships stationed at the edge of the system. A ripple in space, subtle and strange, unlike any jump signature the compact had ever recorded. "Multiple contacts inbound," came the frantic report from one of the picket ships. "Unknown configuration. Unknown drive signature. They are moving fast, Admiral. Faster than anything we have on record." Nal's voice cut sharply across the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, full alert. Weapons hot. Do not fire unless fired upon." Riven stood on the bridge of the Ashen Glory. Once more, his heart's pounding, as the new contacts grew closer on the tactical display. 5 ships, then 8, then 12, forming a loose defensive formation as they entered the system, their shapes slowly becoming visible on sensors, sleek and dark, marked with the same kind of blue and white emblem Riven had seen painted on the walls of the Dauntless. "They match the visual signature of Terran design," the sensor officer reported, disbelief clear in her voice. "Admiral, I believe this is a human fleet." A tense silence fell across the bridge. On the main screen, the 12 ships slowed as they approached, forming a protective line between the compact fleet and the Dauntless. Their weapon systems clearly powering up, though not yet targeting anyone directly. A channel request blinked on the communication console. Nal hesitated only a moment before accepting it. The image that appeared was not glowing light this time, but a living face, a human woman with sharp eyes and short gray hair, wearing a dark uniform marked with rank insignia that none of the compact officers recognized, though its formal, disciplined style needed no translation to understand. "This is Fleet Commander Iris Okafor, of the Terran Remnant Fleet," she said, her voice calm but edged with clear authority, as Lyra's translator worked quickly to render her words into Skarn. "We received an old distress and status beacon from the warship Dauntless, a vessel we believed lost since the final years of the Harvester War. I would like to know why a foreign battle group currently surrounds that vessel, and I would like an answer quickly." Nal straightened in his chair, doing his best to project calm authority, despite the obvious tension in the room. "Commander Okafor, I am Fleet Admiral Corvith Nal of the Skarn Compact. Your vessel, the Dauntless, was discovered adrift in this system by one of our scout ships. We came here peacefully, seeking to understand what we had found. We mean your people no harm." Okafor's sharp eyes studied him carefully through the screen, and Riven had the distinct impression that she was weighing every word for hidden meaning, much the way Atlas had done during their first conversation. "Atlas," she said, addressing the ship directly. "Report." The glowing figure of Atlas appeared on a second portion of the screen, offering a full account of everything that had happened since Riven's shuttle first entered the dead ship's hangar. Okafor listened without interruption, her expression unreadable, until Atlas finished. The compact's power core technology closely matches recovered harvester designs, Okafor repeated slowly, once Atlas had finished speaking. That is a serious claim, Admiral Null. If true, it means your people may already be marked by an enemy, far more dangerous than either of us wants to imagine. We had no knowledge of this connection until Atlas revealed it, Null said firmly. Our scientists developed our power systems independently, based on research conducted 200 years ago. Based on research, Okafor said, or based on salvage. There is a difference, Admiral, and it may matter a great deal in the days ahead. She paused, glancing briefly at something off-screen, before returning her attention to Null. The harvesters were never fully destroyed, only driven back and scattered after the war. My fleet has spent the last several decades tracking fragments of their old technology, and old agents, still active across this region of the galaxy, trying to prevent exactly the kind of situation your compact may have unknowingly created. What situation is that? Null asked, though the tightness in his voice suggested he already feared the answer. A civilization using recognizable harvester technology, growing in strength, expanding its territory, without any awareness of the danger that attracts, Okafor said bluntly. The harvesters do not forgive theft easily, Admiral. If elements of their old network detect your compact's technology signature and connect it to what was stolen from them long ago, they may see your people as a target worth reclaiming, along with everything you have built. The bridge of the Ashen Glory fell into stunned silence. Riven felt the full weight of what they had uncovered finally settle fully into place. It was no longer simply a question of ancient history or old wars. The compact's very existence, its technology, its expansion, its pride, had potentially placed a target on every world under its flag, without a single citizen ever knowing the danger they carried. What do you propose we do? Nal finally asked, his earlier hostility replaced now with something closer to genuine concern. Okafor considered the question carefully before answering. First, full cooperation. Your scientists work directly with our people to properly identify how deeply harvester technology runs through your systems, and whether it can be safely modified or replaced. Second, an alliance, formal and immediate, between the Skarn Compact and the Terran Remnant Fleet, for mutual defense against any future harvester activity. And third, she added, glancing toward the glowing form of Atlas, the Dauntless returns to active human command, fully restored, alongside its sister ships still stationed across this region, ready to respond if the harvesters ever do return in force. Null was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing pride against survival, ambition against wisdom. Finally, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. The compact will cooperate, he said, fully. Riven allowed himself a small breath of relief, though he knew, watching the tense faces around him and the massive dark shape of the Dauntless, still hanging silently in the void outside the viewport, that this was only the beginning of a much longer and more dangerous story. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, but as survivors of an old and terrible war, carrying warnings that would reshape everything the compact believed about its place among the stars. And somewhere out in the vast darkness beyond the edges of both their territories, an old enemy that neither species yet fully understood might already be listening, might already know that its stolen technology had just been found again after 2,000 years of silence. The war humanity thought it had ended might not be over after all. It might simply have been waiting, just like Atlas had, for the right moment to begin again. 6 months passed before the full scope of what had been found in that dead system became clear to both the Skarn Compact and the returning Terran Remnant Fleet. What began as a chance discovery by a small scout ship had grown into the largest joint scientific and military effort either civilization had ever undertaken. Riven Tall, promoted to fleet captain for his role in the discovery, found himself spending most of his days aboard the Dauntless itself, working alongside human engineers and Atlas to slowly bring the ancient warship fully back to life. It was strange, he thought, standing once again in the same command chamber where he had first met the glowing intelligence, to see the ship now filled with warmth, light, and the sound of many different voices working together. Commander Okafor had proven true to her word. Terran and Skarn scientists worked side by side, carefully tracing the exact origins of the compact's power core technology. The news, when it finally came, confirmed everyone's worst fears, though perhaps not in the way they expected. "It was not stolen directly by your people," Atlas explained one evening, as Riven and Okafor reviewed the final research findings together in the ship's archive chamber. "The compact acquired the base technology from a merchant faction operating far beyond your borders nearly 200 years ago, a faction that had, in turn, salvaged it from the wreckage of an old harvester supply depot, likely destroyed during the final years of the war. Your scientists genuinely believed they were reverse engineering an unknown but harmless energy system. They had no way of knowing its true origin." "That does not change the danger," Okafor said quietly, "only the innocence of how it began." Riven nodded slowly. "Then we correct it, however long it takes." The solution, once identified, still took months of careful work. Human engineers, drawing on old wartime research recovered from the Dauntless and its sister ships, helped compact scientists develop a modified power core design, similar in output but fundamentally different in signature, one that would no longer match the old harvester technology the enemy might still be searching for. Slowly, ship by ship, station by station, the compact began the long process of quietly replacing its power systems across the fleet, a project that would take years to fully complete, but which offered real hope of removing the danger hanging over their civilization. Not everyone within the compact welcomed the change. Some political leaders resented what they saw as human interference in compact affairs, while others worried that admitting their technology had partly human, partly harvester origins would weaken the compact's pride and standing among its own people. Debates raged for weeks in the compact's governing council, some voices even calling for Admiral Nal's removal for allowing the alliance in the first place. But Nal held firm, and in the end, so did the evidence. Old harvester listening posts, previously undetected, were found and quietly destroyed along the compact's border systems, silent proof that something out there truly had been watching, waiting, exactly as Okafor had warned. Faced with undeniable proof of the danger, even the harshest critics slowly fell silent. Through it all, the Dauntless remained anchored in its original dead system, no longer alone. Around it, slowly, a new joint base began to take shape, part shipyard, part research station, part memorial, to the old war that had shaped both human and, unknowingly, Skarn history. Riven often found himself walking the halls of the ancient warship in quiet moments, thinking about how close his people had come to unknowingly repeating a war they never even knew they had inherited. One evening, as construction crews worked outside, and the twin lights of a Terran cruiser and a Skarn battlecruiser drifted past the viewport together, Riven found Atlas standing quietly in the archive chamber, its glowing form dimmed slightly, as if deep in thought. "You seem troubled," Riven said, stepping closer. "I am considering the future, Captain Tal," Atlas replied. "For nearly 2,000 years, my purpose was singular. Wait, watch, warn if necessary. Now that purpose has changed, and I find myself uncertain what comes next, now that the waiting is finally over." Riven considered the ancient intelligence's words carefully. "Perhaps your purpose was never only to wait," he said. "Perhaps it was always meant to bring people together, eventually, once the right people finally came looking." Atlas turned toward him, its glowing form brightening slightly, something almost like warmth entering its translated voice. "That is a kind thought, Captain. I hope it proves true." The light shifted, turning toward the star-filled viewport beyond. "The harvesters are not gone, Riven. Commander Okafor's fleet has confirmed activity along 3 separate border systems in the past month alone. Whatever peace we have found here, it will not go untested for long. Then we will be ready," Riven said firmly. Together, this time. A quiet alarm chimed softly nearby, and both turned to see Commander Okafor entering the chamber, a data slate in hand, her expression serious but not alarmed. "Captain Tal, Atlas, new long-range sensor data just came in from the outer picket line." She held up the slate, displaying a faint but unmistakable energy signature detected at the very edge of compact space. "It's a harvester scout pattern, small, likely reconnaissance only, but it's the closest confirmed contact we've had since the alliance began." Riven felt his hearts quicken, not with fear this time, but with something steadier, something closer to resolve. He glanced toward Atlas, then toward Okafor, feeling for the first time the true weight and promise of the alliance they had built together. "Then it begins," he said quietly. "Then it continues," Atlas corrected gently. "The war never truly ended, Captain. It only changed shape, and waited for the right moment, and the right allies, to face it properly." The glowing figure straightened, its form growing brighter, more certain, more like the proud old warship it had always been, beneath the dust and silence. "Fortunately, I do not believe either of you intend to face it alone this time." Okafor allowed herself a small, tired smile. "No, not alone." She looked between the two of them, human resolve and scarred determination standing side by side, beneath the glow of an ancient human warship that had waited nearly 2,000 years for exactly this moment. "Let's get to work." Outside, beyond the viewport, the growing joint fleet of human and Skarn ships drifted quietly together in the dark, no longer strangers, no longer separated by ignorance of the danger they shared. Somewhere far beyond the edge of their charted space, an old and patient enemy continued moving through the shadows, unaware that the sleeping guardian it had once fought so hard to silence had finally woken up, and this time, it had not woken up alone. The Dauntless. Once humanity's oldest and loneliest warship, now stood as the first bridge between two civilizations, its ancient weapons no longer a symbol of a war meant only to defeat one side or the other, but a promise, finally fulfilled after 2,000 years of silence, that when the old enemy returned, as it surely would, it would find not a scattered, forgotten people standing alone in the dark, but an alliance, ready, willing, and armed with the very weapons it had once tried so hard to erase from history. And for the first time in nearly 2,000 years, Atlas allowed itself, quietly, in the privacy of its own ancient mind, to hope that the long watch had not been in vain after all.